How's it going, YouTube? My name's Ninja7, your favorite WoW healing content creator. And guys, we have some more class tuning hitting the game on either the 23rd or I think the 24th, depending on which region you're in. And there are some healer changes coming into the game, and we're just going to go ahead and break them down. But before we jump into it, I do want to say one thing about these changes. Well, normally in mid patches or like the 2.5 or the point 0.5 patches, you normally see a lot of class tunings come into the game, or at least I have in the past. Like, think back in Shadowlands, these were the big major class tuning update patches. But I like what they've done here. They've kind of given us a week to like sit on the new content, I guess content depending on what kind of player you are, and then they're letting like new waves of class tunings come in later. I am personally a huge fan of this, not dumping it all at once. However, there are some pretty major changes coming in these changes. And let's go ahead and jump right into probably one of the biggest ones if you're one of my guildies, but it is Resto Shaman. So the changes coming to Resto Shaman are: one, all healing is increased by 5%. This is only in PvE combat. For the most part, a 5% just blanket increase, like a band-aid fix, is normally, I mean, like if you think about it in the past, it's normally actually had a bigger impact than 5% because more people will want to try it out, and then parses will look better. But shamans are kind of in like a weird spot right now. They are providing the third highest throughput on graph, so it goes like mistweaver, disc priest, and then shaman. But there's just still not a large representation, and a lot of that is due to like their healing profile. They don't have that rampy nature that is normally a little bit better in mythic raiding because you're better at dealing with mechanics. But this flat blanket healing increase will be good because their steady throughput will get even stronger. Their ramps will get even stronger. They are able to store up some pretty strong cooldowns and get some big burst healing off in a raid environment. So all in all, this should be good for their raid performance. But what we're going to be talking about today is their Mythic Plus performance. I mean, these other three changes: Lava Burst damage increased by 20%, Flame Shock by 20%, and Lightning Bolt by 20%. Now, most notably, these are their single target damaging abilities, so this will give them more utility in a raid environment because the few damage globals that they're able to squeeze in a raid environment will provide more steady damage from a healer, which is important. But this also does give them pretty strong damage in Mythic Plus. Now, I am in a pretty unique position in the fact that I am in a guild with one of the top DPSing Resto Shamans in the game. His name's Shamrock. This dude is crazy. He literally is just like our 15th DPS slash 4th healer. He's crazy. He does big damage, so I'm excited to see his parses kind of go crazy this week with the single target damage. But what we are not seeing is a lot of Resto Shaman representation in Mythic Plus. And a lot of that is due to their healing profile. Like if you just take their tier set in a vacuum and look at it, their tier set is not really designed for a Mythic Plus environment. It's not great. I mean, yeah, sure, it does work off of spot healing and chain healing, but for the most part, like, how much value can you really get in a high Mythic Plus key where the damage is like one-shotting or almost one-shotting by just having your Riptides tick into other people? It's really not that much value in a Mythic Plus environment. So this 5% healing increase will also give them some value in Mythic Plus, just making their time to top the party a little bit shorter and just provide more steady throughput in a Mythic Plus environment, letting them get more globals off on damage. But I've said it in the past that I'm not the go-to guy for Resto Shaman at all. However, I mean, it doesn't take a genius to look at the Mythic Plus leaderboards and see that there is only one Resto Shaman in the top 100, and there's only 4 Shamans total in the top 200. So they are in desperate need of something. And although these changes are likely meant for the raid environment, their single target damage getting increased and then a blanket healing increase, I do think that this will help them also in Mythic Plus. Obviously, any amount of buffs will help a class in Mythic Plus, but this healing change is much needed. I mean, just think about their chain heals are going to hit a little bit harder on the full party. Bosses are going to die faster with the Resto Shaman because their single target damage is going to be better. Their prio damage is going to be better. All around, solid changes. I want to see how these play out, but I'm open. Personally, I would like to see a little bit more. If they could cater some more changes to their Mythic Plus Healing, I would be a fan. So all in all, a thumbs up for the Resto Shaman. Any amount of buffs for a class that is not performing to its highest potential is always going to be a thumbs up in my books. It might not be where you want it to be if you are a Resto Shaman player, but it's a step toward that direction. But let's go ahead and move on to Restoration Druid, and we'll work our way back. The Restoration Druid has some weird changes coming in. These guys have been getting nerfed to Mythic Plus, slight buffs in Raid, but now they are isolating their mana cost. So every single change here is specifically to reducing their mana cost of spells. Now we have Swift Mend, which they don't press a ton, but they do have to press it to proc trees every now and then. Grove Guardians is their newest ability. If you are not a Resto Druid player, this ability is off the global cooldown, which does matter. When you add a spell that costs mana that is off the global cooldown, meaning that you can press it as you're casting like a regrowth, or as you cast a regrowth, or as you're spamming rejuves, you can press these guys, summon them. It's just more mana that you're taking off without like sacrificing time in a pool. So if a 5-minute pool before you were spending all 100 of your mana, now since you're pressing these Grove Guardians almost on cooldown, or at least keeping one rolling or spamming all three, you're basically making it to where now you would cast more than your full mana bar within that 5-minute pool, if that makes sense. But then also reducing mana cost of other important spells to both playstyles, which their mana in Mythic Plus does not matter with how much they're staying in cat form, but Wild Growth does matter. They're taking a lot of synergies in their raid build with Wild Growth and also Efflorescence. These spells are also just excellent AoE healing spells. And then also Regrowth. Now this one is weird because they used to be able to basically make this spell free because they take a talent called Abundance, which makes their regrowths cost less mana based on how many rejuves they have out. But they recently capped that. Now they can't be free, they can only be reduced by 60%. So I'm a huge fan of seeing them reduce the cost of regrowth, especially since their tier set makes them want to cast the spell. Yeah, you're casting it clear casted, but there are times where this spell is excellent to cast, especially if you're incentivizing a playstyle where they're gonna be going into trees more often, getting those instant cast regrowths. I'm a big fan of just seeing all of these all across the board. Now let's go ahead and look at why. This is just a random parse, I believe on Naimu. Yeah, Naimu or Nimue, however you say it. This is just a random Resto Druid parse, but this is their mana bar. Now you'll see here, these weird dips are them swapping in and out of Druid spec. So this is when they're probably in like Bear spec or cat form, and they spend a nice amount of time, you know, seeing how much time they spend in versus how much time our guild's Resto Druid spends in other forms is actually a good amount of time. So they're trying to save some mana or just not spend mana during this downtime. But also notice that they're popping a mana pot. They have a Holy Priest to give Symbol of Hope. They also have a Resto Shaman to give Mana Spring, just these minor mana returns. But they're also running Amalgam's 7th Spine to get the Fragile Echo mana return. And they're still hitting 0% mana. They're still struggling on mana. Now, I looked at a lot of parses. Some parses were able to get away with things like this, but they had a lot of innervates cast on them as well as their own. But for the most part, I mean, you see Resto Druids kind of hit 0 mana a lot, especially toward the end, where a lot of fights, like one that I can think of is Laradar, you want to have a lot of mana pooled up for that last phase. There's a lot of healing required. You want that mana pulled up toward the end of a fight. And we've seen a big drop off on Resto Druid's performance in raids, seeing as how they were very powerful. They have been powerful throughout Dragonflight. And giving them more mana to work with not only will just allow them to do more healing, but also it's just a good way to buff a class. I've said it in the past, but when you try to incentivize people to play the game, making them have to think about running out of mana is a horrible way to balance a spec. Like, the last thing you want is like a heroic, an AOTC farmer, or someone who's pushing toward AOTC to run out of mana every single pool and almost not be able to optimize it. Yeah, you can always optimize it, like spending less mana throughout downtime or something, but for the most part, as the healer, there's just more damage nowadays during downtime that you also you have to be casting healing spells during that time. So just seeing changes to mana costs is a great thing. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. Taking 0.2% of mana off of these spells is probably not a lot, which regrowth does get 0.4, but let's just do some quick math and just look at this one pool by this druid. So going to their casts, looking at Rejuve, I'm glad they're not reducing the mana cost of Rejuve. These guys are spamming this because they want to get 2 on each target, or as many targets as they can. They're already spamming Rejuve, so reducing slightly the cost of Rejuve will increase their mana pool by a ton. But reducing all of these like other spells, the extracurricular, I don't know, the other spells is a great way to give them more mana back. So let's just, right off the bat, let's look at Grove Guardians. They're casting this one parse, casted it on this one boss, so I know it's not perfect. It's not going to, you know, be the exact numbers for every Resto Druid player. But this one person casted it 23 times, and it got a 0.2% mana reduction. So 23 times 0.2, this player will get 4.6% mana returned, or more mana to spend on spells across this pool. Already pretty cool, and that's only one of these changes. Same with Wild Growth. Wild Growth went from 4% to 3.8. This player casted it, let's see, 21 times, so 21 times 0.2. We can just say it's 4.2. So already there, they have, from these 2 spells being reduced on this one pool, they would have 8.8% more mana, if I'm doing my math right, to work with. And that's just 2 of the spells. I mean, you can do the same thing for, let's see, Regrowth got mana reductions, but it's harder to calculate since, once again, these will be reduced and some of them will be free. But Efflorescence, you know, on fights where you're moving a lot, you have to keep placing this thing down. It's pretty annoying. 13 casts, 0.2% of mana returned, or its cost reduced on each cast. Already, you can see how it can add up, and you can have a lot more mana to work with. All in all, I'm a huge fan. The last thing I want to see is a druid innovating themselves. And as someone who does not main Resto Druid, I love this change. So if you're a Resto Druid player, you have more mana to work with, help the rest of us out. Come on, help us out. All right, now moving back to Holy Paladin, notice that they are only seeing 2 changes. And they are changes to 2 of their AoE damaging spells. There are no healing increases. They are happy with the way that they're performing and healing, which for the most part, you don't see these guys at the top of leaderboards for throughput, but they still are providing solid throughput plus the amount of utility that they provide. However, these changes are literally just to damage and just AoE damage. So they're not buffing any of the spells that work with like Avenging Crusader. They're just buffing their Mythic Plus AoE damage. But let's look at why. So I have 2 parses pulled up. This is like one of the top of Tal'Dazar Holy Paladin parses on damage specifically, and then one for Disc Priest. Now you'll notice right away the Disc Priest is doing less damage, but when you look at a little deeper, you'll notice that the Paladin is running the Tendril Mythic Trinket and also the Tank Trinket from Fyrak, which both do pretty big amounts of damage. So if you remove these 2 damage sources, which are items that the priest also technically does have access to, then you'll see that they are only doing about 56,000 like raw damage from their base kit. And when once again compared to this priest player who is not running either of those DPS trinkets, who can do 71,000 with their base kit. So yes, I am looking at a parse that is weird, or a log that is weird, but as long as we understand what we're looking at, we can kind of start to see the issue. Their AoE damage is pretty low, and look at this. This player casted Shield of the Righteous 199 times. Now, why is this one of the spells that's seeing a pretty big damage increase? Which the 2 spells are Consecration, which is the AoE that they put on the ground, and Shield of the Righteous, which they just bash their shield in an AoE cone. These are both seeing a 30% increase. Now, there are a couple things. One, Consecration, they want to keep this up always. They just want to stand on this. It's like free to do so. So to have this do more damage is just good passive damage. Other healers have excellent passive damage options like Healing Rain on Resto Shamans, the tier set on Evokers, and like Mistweavers and Disc Priests just do passive damage to do their healing. Like, all these other healers have great passive options, so to see their passive option get buffed is great. However, the buff to Shield of the Righteous is amazing because Shield of the Righteous costs 3 holy power. So when they are deciding to use Shield of the Righteous, they are actively, consciously making the decision not to use that 3 holy power and that global cooldown on Word of Glory. So they are sacrificing a lot more to get that damage. This is not passive damage. They're having to sacrifice a lot to get this damage. So the trade-off is just not there. You see this 200 casts of this. He sacrificed almost 600 holy power to get that amount of damage, and it's still not their top source. But what is their top source is Holy Shock. So to get this much damage, they are also deciding, I will not be Holy Shocking my party for healing. I will instead be using one of my 2 charges, or technically you have more than 2 charges because they can reset or just not go on cooldown, but they're actively deciding not to Holy Shock their party. So the trade-off is bigger to get a smaller return on damage, which, yes, if you take away these trinkets, a smaller return on damage than something like a Disc Priest, which when a priest decides to use a global cooldown to smite an enemy, it's not that they are sacrificing a healing global cooldown to do that damage or sacrificing a healing cooldown to do that damage. Instead, they're double dipping. They are getting the healing done from this smite. This smite does the healing because of how Atonement works. Same with Mistweavers. My Mistweaver viewers, you know that for the most part, we just press damage buttons. We're just pressing Rising Sun Kick, Spinning Crane Kick. We're doing big damage, but that damage is doing healing. It's not the same for a spell like Shield of the Righteous. They are sacrificing healing to do this damage. So all in all, pretty good. And I'm pretty sure there are talents that make this do a little bit of healing, but for the most part, it's pretty negligible. This is a great change because once again, they just don't have the means in their kit right now, like in Shadowlands, or I'm sorry, in Dragonflight Season 3, to do this same damage with as much ease in a key. So all in all, great change. And these are not like insane changes that will make it, 10.1.7 once again. Holy Paladin will not be like back at the top of the meta, but they're going to be doing more AoE damage. It's going to be more fun to play this spec. I think more people will play it because they're going to see slightly bigger yellow numbers, but for the most part, this will not break them. This will just put them in a good spot and make it feel less punishing to have to compete with damage by using a lot of resources to do so. So all in all, once again, big thumbs up from me. Now, next up, we're going to talk about what classes are not on this list, or 2 of the classes, and those are Mistweaver Monk and Disc Priest. Notably, I'm not saying they need to be buffed, trust me, but notably they're not getting nerfed, and they are both top performing. I mean, once again, coming back to like a random raid parse, there's a lot of Jade Green and a lot of white, specifically Disc Priest white, on these parses. Same with Mythic Plus. What does this tell me? This does not tell me, oh, they just forgot to nerf us, or I don't think they need to be nerfed. What I think is that they're finally on our page. They are on the same page as us. The devs are on the same page as us, where instead of, continuously nerfing this top class to come down and just be below the next top class, they're finally seeing, okay, this is where I like the healers to be. Start pushing up the rest of the guys. And this is what we've been asking for. I know they've done it in the past. But for them to make I think this is a statement. For them to not nerf Mistweaver, not nerf Disc Priest, but buff everyone else, it's a great change. This is a great set of class tuning, in my opinion. But let's go and get back into it, and let's talk about the next class, which I believe is the final class that we have to talk about. Yes, so Holy Priest. And guys, these are some juicy changes. So right off the bat, Smite's damage has been increased by 30%. Big damage increase. Also, their single target Holy Word stun that does damage increased by 30%. So already their single target damage is going to be increased. So their passive raid damage is going to be a little bit better, but more importantly, their Mythic Plus damage is going to be a lot better. So this is great. I love to see them continue to kind of separate spells between specs like Holy Priest and Disc Priest. Imagine if they just buffed all of Priest's smite damage by 30%. That would be a nightmare, but doing this is excellent. And then once again, Shadow Word Pain damage increased by 15%. So their single target damage is going to be a lot better, which, like I said, will make them, technically more viable in Mythic Plus and Raid. Will it push them beyond Disc Priest? I don't think so. I still think Disc Priest right now just has a ton of utility in a Mythic Plus environment, a ton of survivability to the group, that I don't think this will make them surpass them in the meta at all by any means. However, this is good. They're going to be doing more damage, and you will be seeing more Holy Priest time keys that they otherwise would not have been able to. If they fail a key by 1 second, now they won't because they're doing a little bit more damage. So that's good. That's a good change. But what's even better is the changes to their healing. Now, already you're not seeing a ton of Holy Priest pop up on charts, like on graphs for raids. So these healing changes are going to be good for raid. However, I'm more excited about these healing changes for Mythic Plus. So their heal and flash heal, so their 2 single target healing spells are going to be increased by heal 25%, flash heal 15%. Now they have moved away from the heal, flash heal, heal, flash heal. I believe that was called Flash Concentration playstyle in Mythic Plus, and moved more toward a build very similar to their raid build, where they just cycle Holy Word spells and get the healing done that way because the spot healing is stronger. So to see buffs to their spot healing for specifically isolating Mythic Plus, that is excellent. That's a great change. I'm a huge fan of these buffs. I don't know if they're going to swap up their build entirely to kind of like utilize these buffs to their fullest extent yet. However, I do know that when I do Holy Priest keys, and when I look at Holy Priest keys, they are casting Flash Heal a bit because they're not taking their AoE healing spells that require casting. So Flash Heal is how they get the job done when they have no Holy Words to use. But also, once again, isolating a Mythic Plus environment, Sanctify is pretty underwhelming. I mean, it's an AoE ground that can hit the whole party if everyone is kind of loosely stacked. So that is good, but it really does not move health bars like you would want it to. So buffing its healing by 25% in a Mythic Plus environment is so good. I mean, so good and very much needed for big slams of damage in Mythic Plus content. But where these changes get juicy, where this change specifically gets juicy, because let's be real, once again, they are not currently playing a heal flash heal rotation build in raid environments either. Will this change that? I don't know. I don't think so because of how good this Sanctify healing change is. So let's just go to one of the top Holy Priest parses and just look. 23 casts of Holy Word Sanctify doing like 10 million healing. That's a pretty crazy change, especially because they can like maneuver their tier set, or they can wait or save these Sanctify charges for their tier set so that they don't go on cooldown. I mean, an AoE heal spell getting buffed for a raid environment is already good, but to see this one specifically get buffed is amazing, because it really did need some help in a Mythic Plus environment, if you were to ask me, and I've heard it echoed throughout the Holy Priest community. So let me know what you guys think if you do main Holy Priest. Let me know down in the comments what you think about these changes. But all in all, I love this because this will not break either of their playstyles that they're currently doing, because they are not currently playing around these spells like they used to. Whereas this will push them up in raid for sure, but also just make a spell that always felt like a, you know, just bad in a Mythic Plus environment. It'll make it feel a little bit better. I don't know how much it will I don't think it'll break the spell at all in a Mythic Plus environment, but I do think that their healing is about to get pretty juicy in a raid environment. So that's all the healing changes coming to us next week, next Tuesday or Wednesday, once again, depending on what region you're in. What do you guys think of these changes? Because I know my viewers play all different specs. That, you know, some of you guys, most of you guys play Mistweaver, but a lot of you guys play these other specs. What do you think about your healers changes? Let me know down in the comments below. I personally am probably most excited to play my Holy Priest after these changes. The bigger damage, the better healing is just a good combo. But I think one of the best changes would probably be like the Resto Druid changes, just giving them more mana to work with, because I like that as a way to tweak a class. But guys, let me know once again all of that down below, what you guys think. Thank you so much for watching this video and for all the support lately, especially to my patrons. These guys are absolutely insane and carry this channel and allow me to make videos like this one. So if you want to support this channel and see more videos like this in the future, then make sure and click on that link down in the description below and check out the Patreon, where there are a ton of different tiers that you can support. But guys, my name is ElvinNinja7. Thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure and like it on your way out, but I'll see you guys in the next video. Until then, take care.